Hey, this is Alex from Los Angeles.
This is Karen from San Francisco. Welcome to Movies That Shaped Us. We're two longtime friends who grew up on opposite ends of the globe with very different backgrounds, but we're both shaped and are still being shaped by the movies we see and love. In each episode, we'll cover a topic around important places, people, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through three of our favorite movies. But today, sounds like we're doing something a little bit different because this is, ta-da, a bonus episode on the Oscars, which just wrapped last night.
Yes.
What are we doing, Alex?
Yeah, so like you were saying, Karan, this is a bonus episode. So surprise, we're showing up in your feed a week earlier than we normally do, but there will be a regularly scheduled episode next week. Don't worry. This is a tradition we started last year because we both love the Oscars, as we've talked about many times. We have a couple episodes specifically around the Oscars itself and categories we really like scores and acting. So you can go back and listen to those episodes if you want more of our thoughts. But we're big Oscar fans, and we both watch the show. Not in the same place, unfortunately. We've done that in the past, but not this time. And we want to talk about our thoughts on the Oscars, and not only that, then just get into our top movies of last year. So our own kind of what the Academy does, but our own version of it. So we did have, just reminding regular listeners, we did an episode on the movies that shaped our 2022. Which were, movies that represented the year. But this is going to be our actual movies that came out last year. What is our favorite? Just a standard list. And I'm sure all of you guys are itching to know what we thought. So we'll each be bringing forth our three favorite films of last year.
That sounds lovely. And as if you people were not sick of all these movies that have been talked about ad nauseum for the last 6 months. But this is one last time.
That's week. Right. Yeah.
One last time.
It. Exactly.
Goodbye to 2022 officially starting today.
Yeah. Okay, so why don't we then jump into our thoughts on the Oscars? So Karan, overall, what were your high level impressions when the show was over? What'd you think? Happy, sad, upset?
Yeah, I mean, as a show, I thought this was very good.
Yeah.
It sort of felt like, back to form. It was good to have a smooth running show that felt like a very tightly run ship. Nobody was assaulted. There were there were some bad jokes, but usually, they weren't. And I think I liked kind of the 1920s theme. There was a lot of reverence to the art of filmmaking sprinkled, in a pretty good way throughout the ceremony, which is sort of what this thing is all about, And I was appreciative that the producers embraced the fact that let's make the show about the people who love the show.
Yes.
Let's stop pandering to people who don't care about the show, and that's totally okay. So yeah, I quite enjoyed it. How about you?
No, a very, very similar thoughts. I thought it was more of a classic, like a return to classic form of the Oscars. Definitely they know who their audience is, and they're trying to serve their audience and not trying to overextend. No one was slapped. So big improvement from last year. But I also thought that they actually handled that very well. Consistent remarks and jokes about the incident, but not bringing up the assailant's name. They never mentioned Will Smith by name, but they referred to him a lot of different times throughout the show. And I thought that was a classy way of handling it. But at the same time, you have to acknowledge what happened last year. I mean, that was so outrageous that you can't just ignore it. And I thought they did a good job without making fun of the fact that it happened. So it wasn't like in bad taste. It wasn't like belittling the seriousness of what that was, which was an assault on national TV. I thought they did a great job. I thought Jimmy Kimmel did a very good job.
Very good.
Yeah. So maybe we can then get more specific into just the show. And, I mentioned Kimmel. Maybe I can start with my thoughts on him. I think he this is his third time. I really enjoyed his first time hosting. His second time was not as successful. And I think this one was more of a return to form for him. I thought he did a very good job. I loved his opening monologue. I'm a sucker for sticking yourself into the movie, so I loved a little bit at the end when he's there with Maverick in the cockpit and has to parachute into the show. I thought that was fun. They didn't
great opening, by the way.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, great opening. Though it was kind of odd. So I live relatively close to the Kodak and where they have the Oscars, and I didn't hear the flyover. Which is a little odd. I thought I'd hear them, meaning like outside, like just in, if I didn't have the TV on. So I assumed that actually was happening. and then it wasn't something where they edited it in or whatever. But I thought that was really awesome. Like I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
Like but I thought the montage was great, like you said.
Hmm.
What did you think of Kimmel?
I think it was great. And to be honest, yeah, I agree. The first one was amazing, and that sort of felt more like what he does on his show.
Right.
This one to me felt like a little bit of who his sort of brand of comedy and such, which is on full display on his show. But there's also a little bit of, Billy Crystal-esque
Mm-hmm.
energy kind of creeping in. Like this was tongue in cheek, he was pulling everyone's legs and such, like he always does. But
Right.
there was a sense of respect, there was a sense of comfort. His
Yes.
energy felt a lot calmer. So I think he is slowly transforming into some of the best hosts we've had on the ceremony, joining kind of the elite group of Billy Crystal, Whoopi, what have you.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was very good.
That's a great point, actually. I didn't think about it like that before. His previous ones were more like Jimmy Kimmel doing the Oscars, and this
Yeah.
was more like Jimmy Kimmel Oscar host, if that
Yeah.
if that distinction makes sense. And I
Yeah.
sort of respected the fact that they didn't do a lot of those what I think of kind of lame bits sometimes. Like we're
I
ordering
know.
pizza for everyone, or oh, I'm taking a selfie with people in the audience. He just was up on stage most of the time. I mean, honestly, maybe they did that so that he wasn't hit in the face or something, but I liked that those
Um,
gimmicks always feel like they're forced and they're trying to
totally.
turn the show into something that it's not. And for whatever reason, they only had one bit he was walking through the audience. And yeah, that was actually pretty funny. The little bit of the questions, right, that he was asking certain folks in the audience. But I liked that they didn't seem pandery at all.
Yeah. The walking down in the aisle probably worked the least, but it was
Right, right.
still passable and it was very short. So I'm glad we were done with it. But yeah, all his jokes, there were some laugh out loud moments. Like, so glad that Nicole has finally been
Oh,
freed from the abandoned AMC.
yeah,
And
that was my
I like,
favorite
we
joke of the night.
laughed
Yeah,
so
I think that
good
was my
and
favorite joke of the whole night.
so good. Some really,
Yeah.
really good moments.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And then the stage looked great. What did you think of the production,
Oh,
such overall?
yeah, no, that I love the stage. I'm a big Art Deco guy, and I
Yeah.
love how, like what you said, they're really giving like reference to the golden age of Hollywood, the birth of
Hmm.
the Hollywood and the American film industry in the teens and 20s. I liked how the stage was moving around at certain points. I thought that I liked what they were going for with bringing some of the props on the stage.
Yeah.
But the one of the moments I thought just did not work at all for me was when they were presenting the editing award
I
and they had sort
know.
of like an
It was
old
like we
fashioned
were like,
edit.
what is she doing back there?
I know, and then someone editing on a computer. I'm sort of like, what is this? Like a Disneyland ride? Like it just seemed. I felt bad for these actors
I
having to
know.
stand back there, and it was weird. That stuff didn't work. And then when they're talking about cinematography, which I actually thought that was a nice moment
Yeah.
with the two actors from Creed 3.
Yeah.
But having the camera be there, I don't know, something about that just didn't really work for me. But I liked the attempt of what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
Like bring in some of those classical, like, oh yeah, we're a craft and this is the how it works
Yeah.
a little bit behind the scenes. I thought that was nice. But yeah,
Yeah.
the stage I thought was great. Oh, one thing I really loved too was how the seats were illuminated in the back. They do the wide shots.
Love
That was
that.
so cool. I'd
Very
never seen that.
thoughtful, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it kind of really tied. And I love the whole introducing the best pictures that way. Like the montages make sense. They didn't have like
Yes.
people, rolled out to introduce the movie and then play a trailer or a clip. Like it just was moving,
Mm-hmm.
at least in those aspects, really well. And the visual lighting and such kind of added to that. So yeah, I thought that was great. Yeah, I agree with you on the props and such on stage. Now that I've thought about this a little bit more, I think this was just them trying and flirting with this idea of giving all these craft categories a little bit more importance this year after what they did
Oh
last
my
year.
God. Yeah.
So my hope is that they return to true form the way things were in the 80s or even in
Mm-hmm.
the 90s, where like the costume people, they had like a fashion show,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the art direction stuff, you really saw a tableau of every movie where you could see details of what they'd created. So I'm a sucker for that sort of stuff.
Me
I
too.
hope that they go, because the thing is, you have to commit to the stuff, right? If you
Right.
just do like a little bit, like I think that's why it feels a little bit out of place if you just do it
Mm.
a little bit. But if you
Yeah.
do it full on, it actually works. But I get it. There are ratings, they are coming out of a lot of pressure. I think they wanted to maybe start a little bit small on that and then hopefully go bigger once the show has moved to streaming.
Oh, you think it's gonna move to streaming?
I think it should.
I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
if they would.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if they would, but I think it
Oh.
should. It'll
We
just
should.
free them up a little bit.
Yeah, maybe we could talk about that at the end of the discussion on
Yes.
different things we think that could go. That's an interesting thought. So yeah, maybe getting more to the show itself. So it was a big, I think in a way, kind of a historic night in terms of the number of awards won by Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is a film that we covered on our 2022 films of 2022. So if you want to hear our full thoughts on that film, you can listen to that episode. But yeah, I mean, the amount of the major awards they won, I mean, they cleaned up in all the editing, screenplay, directing, picture. Like, what are your thoughts? Maybe we can start there with that historic, those historic wins. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so many records broken left,
Yeah.
right, and center. Most picture with like above the line wins. A24 absolutely killed it. A big night for people of color. All sorts of things broken, which is wonderful and great.
Yeah.
I like the movie a lot. Like I said, it was in my top 3 movies that shaped my 2022. So I was, happy to see seemingly a weird, odd movie that you would not consider to be an Oscar movie that came out literally a year ago. It's South by Southwest this weekend. That's when it premiered.
Yeah.
So to go that distance is pretty remarkable. And very happy for some of the individual wins. Like, somebody like Ki Hui Kwan, which probably was my favorite speech.
Yes, me too.
We teared up kind of watching that. It was a big high. Seeing Michelle Yeoh get an award was amazing. I don't know if this is ever going to happen again. As much as I think, spoiler alert, Kate Blanchett has given the performance of the decade, or probably, I don't know, many, many decades going back. Like that performance will be studied for years to come. But it's okay. She has to, so I was happy for Michelle. I will say though, I think this is where the ceremony overall started to flatline for me a little bit, is that I guess I've realized that I'm not a big fan of clean sweeps. Like, it's fun to sort of have the well-distributed, the way they've been doing in the past few years. And maybe just jumping the gun a little bit, but walking in from the ceremony and having, some really noteworthy films like Tar and such, and I don't want to spoil my top 3 list, walk away totally empty-handed. Is not great. And I feel like some of those wins could have gone to some other people, but overall, very happy for their win.
Yeah, like I was not a fan of that film. I talked about it on that episode. Though I was happy for its, like, I'm happy in its success, and that I liked that this wasn't an example, which I think I've criticized the Academy for in like the last 10 years of, picking these movies that, they may or may not be good, but no one sees them. Like they're tiny budget films. This movie made $100 million, was a big hit, did cross over, and also was interesting, different. It was a combination of all these different factors. So I liked that it got recognized for that. I was not upset by any of its wins. Very happy for the acting wins. I mean, having both Michelle Yeoh and Jamie Lee Curtis, who are 2 actresses I've loved for a very long time and that were genre actresses. And I would watch Michelle Yeoh's like Hong Kong kung fu movies a lot in the 90s, and Jamie Lee Curtis with her horror and comedy films. And I genre films are so rarely recognized, and actors from them so rarely recognized at the Oscars, that made me very happy, and sort of felt like, as fans of these actresses for so long, I kind of won a little bit myself. So that was nice to see. But I agree with you in terms of the sweet factor. I think less of that for me, that was a little bit I guess I should say, like, kind of get boring after a while, is I can't think of one award that actually was a surprise win or surprise loss. Like, it was incredibly predictable what would happen, and usually there's some crazy thing that happens in one category or another. I don't really think anything that I was like, oh my god, did that actually just happen? It was very, very predictable. So as that started happening more and more, I was like, oh, it's one of those nights where it's everything that you thought. So that made it less interesting. So for me, it was less about the fact that it was a sweep. It was more that it wasn't like a surprise sweep, because sometimes that can happen too. You're like, oh my god, this film's gaining momentum. What's going on? And then all of a sudden at the end, it's like, whoa, they did get Best Picture. Like, I didn't see that coming. So it was a little boring in that respect, but I was happy with all the wins. There wasn't a win I was sort of like, upset by.
No, I'm with you. And I think it especially felt a little bit more of a damn squib in that sense, because leading up to it, a lot of these races felt a little bit open. Like it felt like
They
anything
did.
could happen. But
Yeah.
then the most predictable thing happened. And I think when Jamie Lee won, that's when I was like, oh, okay, this is going to go this way. Who I love, but that was the one place I was rooting for Carrie Condon to win because I think she's just amazing in that movie.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then also for the writing awards, and if the Daniels are great, they had to win either directing or writing. And I was hoping if they were going to get directing, give somebody else writing. You have Martin McDonagh, Todd Field, like amazing. Like this year's original screenplay lineup was incredible, like hands down some of the best I've seen.
Yes.
Or vice versa, like give the Daniels writing because it doesn't get more original than this movie.
I actually,
in some ways, well, I know you might.
I would push back on that. Yeah, I think it was the most unoriginal screenplay of the original screenplays nominated, personally. But I agree with you. I was a little bit like, actually, when they won director, for a second, I was thinking, okay, well, maybe the best picture's not going to them, and they wanted to give them the writing and the directing. They can't award all. Like, I just was thinking, there's no way they're gonna get all, and they did. They got all three of them. Again, not that I was mad about it per se, but I was just like, I guess a little bit taken back of like, wow, because these are historic wins. And I'm not just talking about, the fact that these are second-time directors and there's a lot of, non-white talent that got recognized. Historic just in the amount of awards that this film won. Yeah. And the major awards, it was just like, whoa, this film we're just picking? It's like, okay, like, I guess it could be worse.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the main thing, right? Like when the surprise factor just goes out of the window,
right?
Then the enthusiasm, and you can read it even on their faces because they had also cleaned up all the gills and everything. That at some point,
right,
even they were not expressing that level of enthusiasm. I feel like Ke Huy Quan was the only one who had that level of enthusiasm and genuine sort of shock and excitement. Michelle was happy, but I think her SAG win speech was actually way more emotional and incredible because I don't think she thought that she's going to make it till this point. So she's like, yep, SAG's here. I'm here. So I'm going to, milk this moment as much as possible. But
I agree with you in terms of getting to the speeches. Then I did feel that a lot of the speeches felt like the leftovers from the fact they've given that same speech so many times, and in the beginning it's very exciting and they can actually feel genuinely thanking all these people, and yes, it is obviously the biggest award and this is the one they want. There's something about that getting up there and just doing that again that did feel a little bit like tired even in some of the speeches, not all of them. I think you're right, Ke Huy Quan, that was my speech of the night. And actually Brendan Fraser, even though he kind of didn't really even say anything, but it was honestly like a genuine sense of, I felt like he was out of body experience. We didn't even know what to do.
He was still processing it, the whole thing.
Right. Even though, he was leader to win, he'd won all the awards leading up other than the Golden Globes, but that one, obviously, they have a history there. So those are the two I felt
he didn't
more
win
like
the BAFTA. Genuine. So I think this was actually a legitimate shock.
Oh, right. That's true. Yeah. That's true. Yeah, any other sort of like awards you want to, that were, again, something to kind of talk about that you were surprised by, or do you want to get into, highlights, lowlights overall?
Yeah. No other surprises. I was happy Top Gun won at least one award.
I know. Yeah, I know. I thought it had a chance with editing too. Like I thought some of those other ones could have gone broken different ways, but at least it's an Oscar-winning film.
Yeah.
It is an Oscar-winning film.
Exactly. So that's something. Speaking of, we didn't say this up front, which is kind of a bummer that Tom Cruise wasn't there. I mean, he figured out that we're not going to win.
Yeah. I'm
not going to expose myself for any jokes or what have you, sitting in the front row. So
that was very disappointing to me. And at first I thought, well, maybe they're going to do some surprise thing where he comes in at some point and they're sort of saving that because it was so odd that he wasn't there. I mean, to be honest, I was very excited about this Oscars because I thought Tom would be in the audience. And he doesn't normally go as much as, this is the 90s anymore where you get all the top talent who show up at the awards anymore. A lot of the really big stars really aren't there in the audience, much like they used to be. So I was sad actually that he wasn't there. And then about halfway through the award show, I was starting to think like you just were, of like, you know what? He's not coming because he knew he wasn't going to win. So that's almost more embarrassing for him to show up I mean, but one thing if he was Best Actor nominated, then he would have showed up.
Right.
But yeah, he's nominated for Best Picture as a producer on Top Gun. But I think he knew, look, I'm not going to win this. Why would I subject myself to, especially what happened last year, right? Like an assault out of the, they couldn't control what happened. I mean, Tom obviously is someone who controls his image to the T.
Yeah.
The one time that he kind of went off the reservation a little bit with that, his career, was in big trouble for a couple of years because he wasn't following a strict sort of protocol of what his image is. And but part of me is also kind of mad at him a little bit. It's like, hey, like, you are the biggest star in the world. This is Hollywood's biggest night. Like, shouldn't you be there? I know it's tough, and I know
you
this,
saved the movies,
right? As Steven Spielberg said,
so, yeah,
right. Like, you kind of should show up at this, and I'm sort of mad in a way and disappointed in him that he didn't, even if it was I don't know. I mean, I know you probably couldn't do this because he was a nominee as well, but to shoot some kind of special video of, I'm on the set of Mission Impossible and I can't make it, but see you at the movies kind of thing. Maybe that would have been tacky, but at least it would have been kind of something.
Or just bring him out on the stage to like intro something. Don't even have him sit in the audience, just come and do your thing and just leave, that's fine. Yeah. But it would have been good to see him, especially because this year forever in the history of movies will go down in the books as Tom Cruise's year. I mean, It is Everything Everywhere's years. Everything Everywhere All at Once is a year, but it's also Tom Cruise's year. So
right.
Yeah, a bit disappointing. And to piggyback on what you were saying, I think overall with the show, I think that was the other thing which maybe contributed to the flatlining feeling. One, of course, we talked about the lack of surprise in one movie kind of sweeping across the board. The other one was just a lack of stars, and it's sort of, and maybe just getting into our next topic of sort of overall feelings about the Oscars and the industry, but it was a very interesting portrayal where it's almost like a new class of filmmakers and talent is being ushered in. And who knows, maybe this is just a blip for this year. Maybe things are, look totally different next year. Who knows? But it was almost like most of the stars weren't there. Some of the elder stateswomen folks were there, but they mostly were just sitting in the audience, like Spielberg and John Williams and such. You didn't get to see them on the stage. So it was mostly this newer, younger class of people and stars who are not stars because we don't have movie stars anymore, sadly.
Yeah.
So I think that sort of takes away from the sheen of the whole event,
No, I mean, that's something I always loved about the Oscars too, growing up. It's like the biggest actors, actresses, directors, they're all there. You got Jack Nicholson, you got Meryl Streep, you got everyone is there.
Stacked.
Everyone is right, and they interact with them, like all the jokes back and forth with Nicholson I used to love back in the day, and but they're all there. And I do feel the other night during the Oscars, watching, be like, there's the wattage of those legends are not there. There really isn't kind of like a passing of the torch. It's almost like they left the room and now there's some new people in here trying to jockey for, now we're the stars. But to your point, I don't know if we really have movie stars anymore. So it felt very like empty in a way because of that. Which is interesting. It's just interesting.
Yeah, it's just sad. And I think it speaks to the cottage industry and the apparatus that the awards has become, that if you're Leo, you're going to show up there and you're going to do the whole thing if you have a movie and if you have, your skin in the game. Otherwise, you're not just going to show up. And that's what it's become. Whereas earlier, you showed up no matter what,
Right.
So, because I would love, like, okay, Meryl and that group is probably, they're older, they don't have a movie. I get it. Why do you want to kind of dress up and do the whole charade all over again? But I would hope that the next batch, like Clooney, Julia Roberts, Sandra Bullock, that class of folks, Pitt, they should all be there. I mean,
Damon,
you
Affleck.
saw Damon. Yeah, you saw. Affleck and Damon were there. Great bits for Kimmel, even though I'm sort of bored of that joke. But
I liked that callback. I thought that was funny. Maybe that's why Damon didn't show up, because he didn't want to face Jimmy Kimmel.
Although he did the first time Kimmel hosted, and that was really funny.
It was very funny. Yeah.
But you saw this at the Globes with Brad Pitt sitting in the front row.
Yeah.
It adds something to it. People look at all these young folks who are standing up on the stage. For them, it also is like a big moment because they're screen legends, people that have grown up with us staring at them. It means something more.
Yeah.
We didn't have any of that this time.
No, and I do wonder if this is not a blip. I think this is just a change in what this award show is. Yeah. But the sad thing is, I don't think because of the way that this Hollywood works nowadays, there aren't the new crop of stars to come up and take these folks' places. It's just this whole idea of the legendary directors, the legendary stars, they're just gonna be fade into the distance. And now we're gonna have young folks that are never gonna live up to that. And I just liked the fact he was bringing the young and the old Hollywood together, which is something that was so great about it. Was Hollywood's biggest night, they always would say, right? But if Brad Pitt's not showing up, Leo's not showing up, Meryl's not showing up, Julia Robertson's showing up, is it really Hollywood's biggest night?
Yeah,
I would say probably no, it's not.
No.
Well,
maybe the Academy needs to think about this, that I think they need to bring all these people back. They're all Academy members.
Right. It's really on them.
I think they need to do something. Well, maybe they will, right? Because this was also a strange Oscar, like right after what happened last year, the year before. So maybe they wanted to sort of maybe the bar was no issues.
Yeah.
Let's get through this. And which they did,
Right.
So I'm hoping they come back to greater form, because soon it's going to be 100 years.
I know.
Which is incredible.
Yeah. If maybe by that point it will be on streaming. I don't know. I feel like that there's too much money to lose in terms of ad revenue for the network, like ABC. I just would be surprised if they would let that go and put it on a stream platform. And then if also, does that render the awards even less, viewed, even though this year was up, it was up big in terms of viewers. So they succeeded in kind of bringing people back. I think a lot of that was due to the fact that it was a great wide swath of nominees of, you had the Avatar and Top Gun, 2 gigantic commercial hits, Everything Everywhere, which also was a big hit. And then exactly. Elvis also was a big hit commercially. A lot of people saw that. And then you have the right amount of the smaller films that got enough critical acclaim that everyone wants to see, whoa, is Tar going to take it over the line or not? And unfortunately, Lydia Tar is, did not get, take it over the line.
She's an EGOT.
Oh, you're right. She's an EGOT. Okay. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So any final closing thoughts, or should we move on to our top three?
Yeah, I guess I love the donkey. I love Jenny showing up on stage.
Oh, that was great.
That was very sweet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, overall very good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was a solid. Yeah, solid. And like you said, maybe then the bar just was make a solid show, get the viewers up, make sure no assaults happen. And they did all that. And actually, I loved the closing joke of Kimmel walking off stage and flipping the years without incident thing over on the placard. I thought that was great. That was a great joke, and a way to sort of like address it in a way that was comical, but not belittling it and not mentioning Will's name at all. But still acknowledging, there was a crazy thing that happened last year, and they can finally put that to bed and move on next year.
Yeah. Oh, one other thing we didn't talk about is the weird ad montages during the show, which made me think of, this is years ago when the first year when they didn't have the host, so Tina, Amy, and Maya Rudolph, they came over, and they had a whole bit that, because they were at that time talking about moving some of the categories in the commercial break. So I have Amy Poehler's voice in my head, because this is how many times I've watched this dumb shit. People are wondering. Where she says that we're not going to give the awards in the commercial, but we're going to give the commercials in the awards. I'm like, yep, that's exactly what you did.
I mean, I will say the Little Mermaid thing was I mean, it's Disney. They own the ABC. They're going to do it. I thought that was unnecessary and definitely like
show it during the commercial break.
Exactly. So that definitely bothered me. Plus that movie looks terrible, but
very dark,
so grim and drab.
I thought there's something up with just a projector or something, but everybody's been talking about how dark it looked. But also Rob Marshall does this. He did this Into the Woods too. It looked pitch black.
Yeah. But I actually liked the Warner Brothers thing. I mean, it's the 100th anniversary of Warner's. It was an acknowledgement of that. Maybe they didn't make it that obvious of this is why we're spotlighting Warner Brothers as a studio versus others. But I actually liked, and I thought they did a good montage, and that's the kind of stuff that I like when the Oscars do, sort of like recognize a another studio. Maybe they just sort of made a little more of a point of why they were doing this because it was
weird.
100th anniversary. And okay, that makes total sense. Like they were, founded 100 years ago next month. Cool. Instead, it just felt like it was a DVD trailer or whatever.
Yeah, but then Disney also had 100 years, and that montage, which is amazing, showed up in the commercial.
Yeah, I think that's where Disney chose to, because not that they run the show, the Academy does, right? But they
Right.
broadcast it, and then maybe they're like, well, we can use our slot either to plug Little Mermaid and make sure everyone sees this trailer, or
Right.
use that, because I also love that commercial, The 100 Years of Disney.
That was amazing.
It's so cool. But I
Very
think
cool.
they made the choice to say, well, let's promote Little Mermaid instead of use that slot for, giving ourselves a pat on the back, which maybe also would have seemed weird to some people of like, why are you congratulating yourself? Again, they don't produce the show, they just air it, but they have a lot of control over the broadcast. But I love that Disney 100 years thing a lot. Hopefully folks watched it and didn't speed through. If you sped through the commercials and didn't see it, you can find it on YouTube. It's a really fun, fun
That's
montage.
a really good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that's a good segue from commercials to
Yeah.
movie montages
Right.
into our top 3 films of 2022.
Yeah, exactly. This will be the movies that shaped us. Academy voting, and it's just the two of us. I guess it's maybe just me for mine and yours for yours. So
True.
yeah, because we, spoiler alert, I guess we have no crossover.
Yep.
But so we'll talk about 6 different films, which I think is fun. And I can kick it off if that's okay.
Yeah.
So my number 3 favorite / best, I'll say best movie of 2022 was Avatar: Way of Water, or The Way of Water. And this movie, I'll just say I was a big fan of the original Avatar. I saw it several times when it came out. I will admit, actually, it sort of, my opinion of it kind of lessened in the immediate past after I watched it for, I think, 5 times in the theater. It kind of like,
Which one? The first one?
The first one. Yeah. I was like, I'm not really that into it. But in the last 3 or 4 years, I've kind of gone back to it and kind of rewatched it. And it's, my opinion of the first film's actually grown a lot. So I was very excited to partake in learning the way of the water. And I think James Cameron, again, raised the bar with what sequels can do, expanding the Avatar universe, introducing new components of what this world is, while at the same time dazzling you visually. I mean, I saw this movie twice in theaters, both IMAX in 3D, and it was just as transformative as the original Avatar was when I first saw it. So it's definitely like a technical marvel. But I feel this time he really upped the ante when it came to the characters, especially. Have you maybe you start with like your thoughts on Avatar 1, and then briefly what you thought about 2, and then I can kind of get into more of what I liked about this one.
No, I remember enjoying and loving the first one. I only seen it the one time and was wowed by the spectacle of it, but never really thought about it ever again. So this movie for me was sort of like, oh, do we even need this? Did I think that I was going to go and watch it? Absolutely. I mean, how can you not? And then as the buzz started to build, we, got a bunch of us together and we went and watched it in IMAX 3D, the way it's supposed to be enjoyed. And yeah, I mean, I agree with you from a technical marvel standpoint and its transportive nature. It's amazing, especially certain parts of it, like the entire water segment. Once they get to the water place, which I've forgotten the name of,
yeah, me too.
It's pretty amazing. That part is pretty amazing. But I also went in with very low expectations in terms of story and meaning and character development and performance and how the whole thing hangs together. In the moment, I was actually pleasantly surprised that, actually, this is pretty good. And I wasn't, bored for the most part. Like I was, and there were some very big highs, especially the third act is absolutely amazing. But I think as time went by after watching the movie, I was like, I'm not going to think about this movie ever again, probably. And I think for me, a lot of it comes down to story, the emotionality of it, the tropes and the very reductive sort of tropes of it, of family. And I know what he's going for, but they just don't really land on me. That said, can I enjoy the technical marvel? Absolutely. Did I think the third act was amazing? For sure. I wish the entire movie was like that. This movie would have then for me been definitely probably in the top 3 films of the year or the decade even, because that last act is just so incredible. But yeah, the story, the emotionality, and some like, half-ass sort of details which don't make sense of Sigourney and why are we, who are we?
Right.
I'm not even harping on the bad dialogue. Like that sort of is like a cop-out criticism. It's fine. I mean, this is who these people are. They talk that way. So, fine, get over it. I'm not too hung up on that. To me, it's just the story, some really big themes being touched on, but not really being explored. But last thing, I love the whale.
Oh my God. Yeah. The Tulkuns. The Tulkuns were,
were amazing.
Incredible. And it was interesting that so much of the second half of the movie revolves around the whales and this whale society. And they didn't touch on in the trailers. Like, I had no idea the whales were coming. And all of a sudden they're here and just like, I want my own like little whale guy to like hang out with and talk to. I mean, the fact that James Cameron's allowing us to, view parts of nature as other humans. Right. Because they can actually talk and communicate the same way that a human can. The first movie for me was more about the themes than it was necessarily about the characters. I really loved the themes that the first movie explored. I think no movies really touched on those topics in that kind of way when it comes to like colonialism, especially, and exploitation and capitalism. I thought it was just a brilliant sort of like reflection of what our society is like today and where it's going. And this movie was less about the overall themes for me. I really did the character stuff really resonated with me. What Jake and Neytiri went through before, how they're trying to hold their family together, why Jake's now running away from his I wouldn't say responsibilities, but in the last movie, he was definitely, we got to take it to the sky people and fight back. And now that he has kids and he has a family to protect and there's something really to lose for him, all of a sudden he spends this entire movie then running away. And then at the very end, realizing that now that he has something to protect is actually the reason why he should be fighting and not running. And I thought that stuff, like his journey really resonated with me, and all the things about, again, family and his kids and really having, love be what was driving him. But then again, realizing that you can't just be all like touchy feel. Love means you can't fight for things that you care about. No, you have to fight back. I thought it was great, and just an evolution too. I like how the time passed on Pandora, and it all again made sense. Like, you're returning to a place you already knew. So I'm definitely gonna be right there for the third one. But it's not in a sense where like I want to know what happens, in the way of like, at the end of Empire Strikes Back, you really want to know like what's gonna come next. Or the Marvel movies when they were being more successful in 10 years or so ago. It's like you really wanted to hear how the story was evolving. This is not really about that to me. It's more like I want to go back, be with these characters.
Yeah, it's an experience.
What's going on, and experience it. It's not like I'm on my edge of my seat. Someone actually, I read some review at one point around this movie of like, it's kind of, you can't spoil it. Like, even if you told someone what happens at the end, it doesn't matter, which some people could see that as a criticism. I actually think that's what makes this movie so unique, is that it's kind of unspoilable. But
no, I agree with, I think Jake's storyline and character development is actually very good. I mean, if we can call it that. I mean, at least it's rich.
There's interesting things.
To me, if they'd just done a little bit more with Neytiri's character and sort of balanced it out, would have felt a little bit more thought through. And then same goes for the bad guy.
Oh, Korish?
It's unclear. I get why he wants to go back, but why the entire might and power and everything is behind him to kind of go back and do this. And then I guess the human child left behind, very, very, I don't never want to say bad things about child actors, but a very bad performance in my mind. So I think it was those things that kind of took away from, the main story arc. So
no, I do agree that Neytiri was a little bit sidelined in this, and they had to focus a lot more around Jake as a father figure. But maybe they'll explore, like, she'll be more front and center in the third one. We'll both be there. It sounds like
we'll both be there
for Avatar 3, The Way of Fire or something, probably. Okay, what is your number 3 best film of 2022?
So depending on the day, I could sort of swap my 3 or 2, but for now, I'm going with Banshees of Inisherin as my number 3. The first time I watched this movie, I liked parts of it, but I also was, I don't know, made me uncomfortable. Perhaps I wasn't so into the whole chopping your fingers down
Mm-hmm.
thing. And then I just happened to watch it again. And there's something so brilliant and amazing about the tone that Martin McDonagh is able to strike of between what is happening in this on this island, and they're just
Mm-hmm.
such rich themes of friendship and legacy and what is the life remaining in front of you matter and mean, but it's all done in a very simple, non-flashy, to me unpretentious way.
Mm-hmm.
Even though this movie has some really varied themes that could go in a very different direction, but it doesn't. And on top of it, it's like it's not a play movie. We
Mm-mm.
have a lot of those movies of people just sitting in a room, and I like those too, but
Right.
this is a movie where it's scope, everything from score to costume design to production, cinematography, all those aspects that we always love talking about on this podcast that make a movie and transport you, they're all at play.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the best performances of the year for me, like all those four performances, I
Mm-hmm.
would give awards to all of them, especially Colin Farrell, Barry Keoghan, and Kerry Condon.
Yeah.
But curious, what did you think about this one?
Yeah, this is my first McDonagh film I've ever seen. I've never seen any
Oh,
of his other
wow.
films. Yeah, this is the first one, and I only went to it because it was getting a lot of
Hmm.
awards discussion, and I'm a huge Colin Farrell fan.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't I think I understand him potentially as a filmmaker now after watching this. I can say the movie I thought was very well made, incredibly acted. All the things you said about the craft of it is just like top notch. And incredibly funny too. I found it
Oh,
very
yeah.
funny.
Very
The
funny.
humor of
And
this was
yeah.
was just spot on. It just I think, and again, I'll know more when I see more of his films. Like the worldview in the film, though, it seemed like the heart of it just was kind of little, I don't want to say like pessimistic, but it was sort of like a negative worldview
Oh,
of like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
well,
That's
and
how he
that
is.
yeah, and that I think I just couldn't get. Like I wanted it to be at least like a more of a gooey center to this, and I felt
No.
I didn't like sort of, yeah, like his worldview was like, no, this is like, you got to treat it isn't about being kind all the time. And no, I think it should be. And like there was nothing wrong with Colin
Yeah.
Farrell's character. Yeah, he was boring and that people didn't like him, but that's not an excuse just to be nasty to somebody. And then you can see
No.
how that nastiness that Brendan Gleeson does towards Farrell then turns Farrell into like a nasty person too. It like ruins his, again, I don't want to use the word innocent because it's not necessarily innocence about him, but it's more just this sweet sort of simple kind of guy. And some people are just sweet, simple people that don't need, they're happy on that island even though nothing's going on, right? Carrie Condon's character, she was unhappy being on this island and things are kind of too boring for her and she wanted to escape and I was happy that she did.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean everyone has to. Some people enjoy the more the simple life thing. And I just was trying to kind of wrestle with, was this movie trying to say like Brendan Gleeson was necessarily right, or was the film commenting on that at all? So that was the piece that I was like, oh, I was kept waiting for it to have some kind of turn where I'd start feeling like the movie was at least viewing Brendan Gleeson's actions as negative instead of either I think it wasn't taking a position on it. And I wanted it to have some sort of position at the
Mm.
end, but I don't know. So you've seen his other films. Is this sort of is this kind of his worldview then of a little
Oh,
more
yeah,
dark and negative?
definitely.
Okay.
I mean, Three Billboards is, I have lots of issues with that movie, but In
Mm-hmm.
Bruges is amazing and it's sort of similar in tone. I think this is even calmer
Mm.
than In Bruges, but I see what you're saying, but that's sort of
I
kind
know
of
it's
what
the
I love
point.
about this movie
Right.
as
Yeah.
well, that it's
Yeah.
ambiguous. And you'll see this is a running theme in all of my movies, actually, that they're all ambiguous movies,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't know, feels very timely and topical of the times that we are living in. And maybe that's topical always
Mm.
because nothing is should be or is black or white, but now more so than ever, it sort of feels like
Mm.
it's so easy to pick apart and just, run this way or the other way, versus this movie and all the other movies that I'll talk about, they kind of leave things on the table. It's up to you. I view it in a way that actually the movie is not on Gleason's side at all, because look what he did. Nobody is happy at the end of this movie. People have
Mm.
died.
Right. Right.
Animals have
Right.
died.
Yeah.
People
Oh
have
man. Oh.
fled. The
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
little small island, which seemed like a very, quaint, beautiful place, is no longer a beautiful place. And
Mm-hmm.
that is the harm. So to me, the movie has a very strong stance on Gleason,
Mm.
but there's no warm, gooey center.
Yeah, I mean that's what, and yeah, maybe we could talk more about all the films because I think you raised a really good point in terms of not only the connection between yours, but then the opposite connection, but
Yeah,
of
you
mine,
have the opposite. Yeah,
literally the exact opposite.
which is part of why I have
Which
issues
is
with all of
interesting.
them in some way. Well, except for one. Except for
And yeah, that's interesting. The other thing that I thought was like the background of the Irish Civil War going on at the same time, which I will admit, like I knew that there was one, but I didn't really know any details about it. And after watching this film, actually, I was like, was this movie trying to be an allegory, or what was this trying to say about that? Because why did it set during that time? And I went back and did like a ton of research and kind of understanding what was involved in that. And then I was trying to wonder if the film was sort of saying that, yeah, that was, obviously civil wars are always bad, but they are, sometimes, depending on what side you're on, I guess, justifiable. Like sometimes that is the only course of action to advance the society in the way that should be advanced. Like American Civil War was necessary, unfortunately, to eradicate slavery and make the country better. Even though I wish we never had to do it, but we did, and I think that was a good thing. And I would have fought on been supportive of fighting in that war. And I just was wondering if this movie was trying to say like they shouldn't have fought it. I was starting to get a little too wrapped up in the political piece of it after I did this research and thinking like, do I disagree with his political stance on this? But the one thing I can say about the movie is there's a lot going on, and was something that I did respect about it and liked it. So I did like the film. I just was, it wasn't as enjoyable as a watch as maybe I thought going in. Especially in the first half, I was like, this is really funny. Like, they're it's the Irish countryside. And then at the end, I was like, whoa, this really went some dark places.
Dark turn, yeah.
Yeah.
I would recommend a second viewing because I think I enjoyed the movie the second time way more.
Yeah.
My take on the Irish Civil War is sort of like these people are just trapped here on the island. Because, the question comes up is that why wouldn't any of them leave? But the thing is that where do you go?
Right.
What would that be like? Because there are literally shells being fired to where you could go. So that's one thing. The second thing also is that it's the same people who are on the same side now fighting with each other. So that's what the other commentary that things can turn. These were also people who are on the same side, and they're no longer sort of this looming dark cloud outside, justified or not.
Right.
There are people still fighting, right? So that can happen. So I think it's sort of it's a foreboding, literally, that you can hear, and the banshee woman walking around being the spirit and sort of calling out that this is coming, as so I think that's what they're trying to go for.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it is a film where I'm like, I would want to watch this again.
Yeah.
And I think now that I know what his style is and what his voice is, perhaps I can kind of get over a little bit my hesitation to the depressing nature of the film if I give it a second go around. So
yeah. All right, what is your number 2?
My number 2 best film of 2022 is a film we already talked about on the podcast. So Top Gun Maverick. I still think, if I had to say movie of the year that represents the year, I would put this. And not represents the year in the sense of like what we talked about on our podcast, but a year in film. I think this movie will go down as historic for not only just returning people to the movies, but also being so damn good. I think honestly is what this comes down to. I mean, this is making blockbuster films like this, making them well is a very hard thing to do. The way that they crafted this movie from a story perspective, the motivations Maverick had, how he gets brought back in, dealing with Val Kilmer's character and the way that they did, and then just setting up the action. And they build, they do a lot of, test runs to explain to the audience basically, okay, this is what's going on. This is how it's going to work. So you understand the stakes, you understand all the mechanics. So when they finally get at the end to the mission that they have to go on, every little, oh my God, now they're going to get the part where it's going to be like this. What's going to happen? And they do such a good job. It's kind of action exposition in a way. It's laying that groundwork, but when they're doing it, you don't even realize it's going on. And those scenes work so well too. I mean, probably like my favorite sequence in the movie is when Tom, he basically gets fired and they're trying to do this impossible run. And then all of a sudden he just jumps in his plane and proves that this run can happen in under 2 minutes or whatever the exact time thing is. And he just he does it and he shows everyone that, no, this is possible. This is the way that you do it. That whole sequence, I'll just cue it up on YouTube every so often. I just have to rewatch that because it's so It's just so incredible. And I do think this film should have won Best Picture. I was rooting for it as an upset. Thought maybe it was possible. When Tom wasn't there, I was like, okay, this isn't gonna happen. But I've seen the film several times since watching in theaters, and I'm, again, like I said in the other episode, I'm not a Top Gun fan. I did not like the original. I still don't. This wasn't a nostalgia play for me.
Yeah.
The movie on itself just blew me out of the water.
Yeah.
What
No,
about
I'm
you?
with you. Love this movie as well. This is definitely in my top 10, maybe top 6 for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you
Yeah.
said, like this is not easy to do. And it's sort of like, how do I say this? It's blockbuster filmmaking that respects the intellect of the audience. I
Yes.
think
Yes.
what
Yes.
I don't like a lot about the big sort of movies is that they're so dumbed down by committee that at some point the stakes feel meaningless, and that's what happens with a lot of Marvel movies, especially recently, even though I haven't watched one in 2 years. But I think this is sort of blockbuster filmmaking, star power, great technology, great storytelling, all working in harmony and elevating each other and showing what we can do today with movies, with everything that we have at our disposal. So yeah, this is kind of a crown jewel moment. And it's sort of like you said, showing the world this is what you can do with blockbuster filmmaking. It's also a movie to be studied, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Like that's why, again, I thought it wasn't just throwing an Oscar nomination to this movie as, oh, well, it's the biggest,
Yeah, like
one
the
of the biggest
screenplay
films.
nomination is deserving.
100%. I thought it had a chance to actually win, to be honest, for a second. I did think it. I did think it had a chance, but it's like the craft involved, and also just Tom, right? I mean, not only is he the last movie star
stemming from there,
but his charisma is amazing. But then also the fact that there's enough of a supporting cast that he works really well off of. He's not so, egotistical that he has to take the whole movie over when it was on screen. Like he shares the screen with these actors in the moments that need it. And then he becomes center stage in the moments that need that. Like everything he does in this film, even with its persona, serves the greater good of the movie. And I think that is why he is the best of the best when it comes to movie stars, because he understands how to walk that line. Like sometimes all I want to see is Tom do something amazing, but other times I want to see Tom give space to a Glenn Powell or to a John Hamm just for a moment, a little scene, something there. So he's not sucking the oxygen out of every part of the whole film, which sometimes movie stars in these vehicles can do that. So I just want to throw it again to him of just, again, I think he should have been nominated for Best Actor, not won, but nominated for what he did in this role. This movie will stand the test of time easily.
I think what you just said to me is the big difference between him and Jim Cameron. You can see Jim in every frame of that movie.
Yes.
And sometimes it works, like we talked about, but when it doesn't work, it's because he himself is in the way of his toys and all of it, versus Tom has that restraint to step away and make room for the story. He really, and you hear him talk, like he really believes and lives by this motto of like, this is a team sport. He understands every department and appreciates and cares about those departments, also the people behind them. And he knows that when they're all elevated, the movie also elevates. So
exactly.
And I think he's applied his learnings and not only his entire career, but also the entire Mission Impossible series and applied on this movie. This is by far the best of the best, I think. If not, it's unfair to kind of put those two in the same mold, but they are now. For me, Ethan Hunt and Maverick there's not much. They're similar.
Tom Cruise. They're both Tom
Cruise. The same person, essentially.
Right.
All right.
Let's move on to your number 2. What do you want to talk about?
Jumping to the person who told Tom that he saved movies. My number 2 is The Fabelmans, directed by Steven Spielberg. I also watched this movie two times, and it's even hard to kind of talk about this movie because on the surface and the marketing of the movie, this movie is like, oh, movies are great, or Spielberg's life story, or all of those things. And I almost feel like the marketing department really fucked up on that, because this movie is so much more. So for a second, if you just forget that this is not about Spielberg, this is like a very dark kind of vignette kind of movie about coming of age
Mm-hmm.
of on one hand. On the other hand, it's about this complicated, interesting relationship we have with art. If you are an artist, especially if you are the creator yourself, and how that pulls you and pushes you, and what that means with respect to family.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a story of a marriage.
Yes.
Um, so, but it's not neatly tied in a bow at all. It's left for you to kind of partake in it, make what you want to make of it. But then on top of all of this, there is the hat of that this is Spielberg's life,
Right.
which
Right.
presents extra weight to it. If you want to take it, if you want to find Easter eggs of why he is the way he is, why he's made the movies the way he's made them, you can do all of that. But
Mm-hmm.
to be, I know this movie has been criticized that, oh, if this was not a Spielberg film, no one would care about it. I totally disagree.
Me too.
I
Me
I
too.
think this movie is special in his filmography, even if this was not his life story at all. So, but what did you think?
Yeah, I agree. I'm a huge Spielberg fan. Like we've talked about on the podcast many
Mm-hmm.
times before. His movies of one of my favorite directors, and I think this is by far his most mature and complicated work. Like, I
Yeah.
actually was surprised when I was watching this film that he even made this. Not because it's not well made or anything like that, but I didn't think this was the type of artist that he was to be able to be so incredibly personal at points where like there were times I felt uncomfortable, honestly, like watching the movie
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, this is something you shouldn't like. I don't know who
Mm-hmm.
this person. I don't know Spielberg personally. Like, why is he telling me like his deepest, darkest emotional pain and the
Mm-hmm.
things that like you clearly can tell have been weighing on him his entire life? And then,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we had talked about in the episode we had where we reviewed Catch Me If You Can,
Yeah.
where I saw that movie for our podcast. You know, I've seen it many times before, but after seeing Fabelmans, and it made me reevaluate it in a different way. And now I do think about Steven Spielberg's films all in different ways now. That I know this extra layer. I mean, a lot of the stuff with his parents I knew about, that was common knowledge, not to the level of detail though that he got
Right.
into on this. And it really just puts his whole filmography, I think, there's another layer to it now in every one of his films that you could explore. I mean, I thought this movie was absolutely fantastic. And just again, shocking that Steven could make a movie like this. Like some of my favorite scenes of the year
Mm-hmm.
are in this film, and especially that moment when you know, his parents are one of his so his parents are getting divorced, and one of his sisters is like crying about it. And there's
Mm-hmm.
this quick shot of like Steven, you know, or
Mm-hmm.
the Steven stand-in, Tammy or
Sammy.
Sammy Fabelman, yeah, is Sammy
Sammy.
Fabelman. Sammy Fabelman is like filming them, and you catch it through like the mirror, and it just like to show just how that is the only way he's able to deal with his own
Yeah.
emotional pain is through art. And then the hallway scene at the end of the film
Oh,
is
the
just
hallway
like
scene is just,
absolutely
I
one of
mean,
the
the
most incredible things
whole
I've ever seen.
episode of him making the student film and
Yes.
showing it and yeah, and how funny the movie is, how heartfelt, performance is amazing. I know Michelle Williams has gotten some criticism for this movie. I love
Oh,
her in
what did they say? I didn't hear that. Like,
that very over the top, and
oh,
but I
like
love,
that's the part,
she's
you know?
so great. That is the
Yeah.
part. Gabriel LaBelle, incredible.
Oh yeah.
All the crafts. John Williams, once again. I think Tony Kushner, this is one of, I mean, they've collaborated so much, but to me, this is like one of the best collaborations between Tony Kushner and Spielberg.
Definitely.
Menschke, also, the way this movie is shot. I mean, this is stating the obvious because it's like all the masters operating at the best of their
Right.
abilities,
Right.
but it doesn't always work and come together this way, you know.
No.
So I know this movie will become like a masterpiece over time. It's a
Yes.
bit of a bummer that it peaked early and then it, yeah, it just, you know, shows the changing of the guard, if you will, that it's almost sad that this movie is misunderstood, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it was a financial failure. Like
Oh
it barely
yeah.
made any money. And I think to your point, maybe it was because they were marketing it as if it was like cinema paradiso or something. Like,
Yeah.
oh, the movies are magic, and it's
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, it is. I mean, the very last like
Yeah.
2 minutes, but that's not what this movie is at
No.
all. It's something a lot more interesting, deeper, and
Weird and
unique,
complicated.
and so unique. Like this movie, I again, it's like you said that they're at the top of their game, and this is all these folks firing at the top of their game, but they're doing it in a way that I've never seen them operate before. It wasn't like Steven's giving you this incredible blockbuster film, like the new Raiders, and it's, he's done it before, but now it's better. I just don't think he's ever done anything like this before.
No.
And in a weird way, it almost feels like his final movie, in some respects.
I hope not.
I mean, obviously I hope not. And I wanted to make more. And I think he's, trying to work on what his next project is, but this is such an amazing capstone to a career. And yeah, this movie would have, if we did like top 4, top 5 movies of the year, this for sure would have been on my list. So I'm glad that we're talking about it, because it's a really important film that not a lot of people have seen. And I think, I highly recommend people just go into this knowing that it's not kind of what you think it is, like like a Shakespeare in Love type of like, oh, now here's where Steven Spielberg was on a little bike, and look, that's going to be the bike from E.T. and there's like a boulder. And it's like, no, it's not that at all in any way. It's I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's in a strange way. Steven's brand himself probably heard this movie, because people don't want to watch that. Instead, if it was just marketed as a coming of age story or whatever else, and horrible poster, one of the worst posters of movies that I've seen in years. So marketing on this one really messed up, but the movie's there, and I know it's going to find its life, and so very happy that you enjoyed it as well.
And to your point, I did wish Steven had won the best director for this, but at the same time, even without that Oscar, this movie will be remembered in his filmography and just in general. In 30 years, people will be talking about this.
All right. The big prize goes to...
So now we're at my number one. So my number one film of 2022 is also my number one film of the 2020s so far. And I think probably my top 15 movies of this century, to be honest with you.
What?
It's RRR. And
goodness.
I actually am so this is the first Indian film I've brought to the podcast. You've brought 2 already. And I want to maybe start with your thoughts on this film, and then we can I think I made my overall position pretty clear on how much I love this film, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts and then kind of get into do a dialogue about it.
Boy, that's a tough act to follow. So I watched this movie, or came to it like very, very reluctantly, because from whatever I'd seen, the images and the over the top kind of action sequences and what have you, it's just not my thing. And also growing up, I've been aware, growing up in India, I mean, I'm aware of sort of South Indian cinema, which has always kind of played this kind of bombastic nature of, action, or really any genre, you name it, but at that kind of frequency. And I've never really been into that, my whole life. So all of that was sort of like, oh, I don't know. To be honest with you, if you had not put this on the list, I probably would have found a way to not watch this movie.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That said, I'm obviously extremely proud of its success. It's so amazing to see a movie from India be recognized like this. I've seen the videos, some posted by you, of various fan screenings, and now an Oscar winner. Like,
yes,
amazing. I'm so proud of all of that, but just not my genre. But having watched it, I'm obviously very impressed by it. There's no question. Like, what Rajamouli has been able to accomplish with the storytelling and the effects and the pacing and everything is absolutely incredible. But again, it's too extra for me. This film did break through, obviously, like internationally, all around the world. Do you have any sense of why this particular South Indian film did? Do you have any thoughts on that? I'm just curious, honestly. Yeah, no, I've been thinking about that too. And I don't know if I have a perfect answer, but I think part of it may be just time and place, right? Like, we're coming back from these 2 weird years and wanting something over the top and larger than life. And it's very evident in the other movies that, you brought up and what have been nominated, that this sort of really fits into that rollicking, leave your home, never seen before experience. kind of the way they would market CinemaScope or what have you in the
Right.
60s, when TV came out. Like, I feel like it's in that vein of something that you've never seen before. So there's some of that. Number two, I think Bollywood dancing or Indian movies, they've slowly been building momentum. I feel like more and more people know about it. I think it was just a matter of time that a true kind of over the top, no apologies movie from India is going to break in. And I think it had to be like an action oriented movie. Because I think in the past, a lot of Bollywood exports have been, romance movies or romantic comedies, or we call them masala movies that have like a little bit of everything. This is that too, but I think it's first and foremost an action movie. So I think there's some of that it's in its favor too, because it makes it a lot more accessible. But then you also get the song and the dance and all of that as well. And it's very well made. That's the other thing. Like, to me, some of those effects are probably very cheesy, and I'm sure some people see that, but you still can't deny about the fact that it's put together at a level that we really have not seen an Indian movie been put together before. So I think it's a lot of that. And I guess thematically, we are in this time of sort of, you look at the movies nominated, some of the other ones, Triangle of Sadness or even Everything Everywhere, kind of, eat the rich or downplay the people who've done bad, what have you, colonialism, like all of these themes that have been playing in the culture in obvious ways or non-obvious ways, they are all heightened to like a 2 million on the decibel point scale. And so, yeah, I think it's just a mix of all of those factors.
No, I definitely can see all that. And I think I'll just add one thing just because that's how I came to it, as I think the digital like distribution, streaming, and the fact that this movie was on Netflix, I do think is a big part of it. So
100%.
This movie premiered in March of last year, in the United States even, and I had not heard of it at the time. Then it went to Netflix, I think, over the summer, and then I started seeing some online chatter about it. Knew that something existed. Netflix would recommend it to me, but I didn't, choose to spend. Honestly, the runtime kind of scared me away from it a little bit. It's like 3 hours. Like, I don't know. I hear it's kind of good, but one of my good friends saw it and was like, "You have to see this." And then I kind of sat down and watched it right at the end of the year, like around Christmas. I was like, okay, I'll give this a shot. And, I was immediately like, this is my favorite movie. I was just pulled in for all, I think, the reasons that kind of you mentioned. It is a little bit of everything. They got some fun romance in there. They also kind of a lot of the themes that I really gravitate towards, especially, the anti-colonialism message, similar to like Avatar, right? It has a lot of that in this, which I think is important stories to tell in this day and age, especially as we look back on those things. And yeah, the action is also amazing. And I think it's like just a combination of all these different elements. Just to me, it just like spoke to me. And I actually spent, I've seen this movie once a month since I saw it. And I've went back and watched.
How many times have you seen it?
Well, so this is four times then. This is because it's April, I think, right? And I spent the last month or so going back and watching every single one of Rajamouli's films. So now I've seen all 12 of his movies, because this just, again, took me by so much surprise of like, this movie is like the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Like, I got to know everything about who this filmmaker is. So that took me about several weeks of finding all those movies and kind of going back, and it's just amazing to see his style kind of evolve. And I definitely see what you mean, even just as a very a newbie and a layman to Indian film, just comparing this, which is now I've seen 12 or whatever of his movies as South Indian filmmaking, versus the films that had sort of broken through to America before this were much more like Bollywood and like Northern India, and the movies that you showed or had on the podcast that I watched. So just interesting just to see the amazing difference between the two. I mean, they're very different types of films, which is kind of, I mean, I know it's obvious to you, but I'm just saying, as like someone who's not as versed in that those types of that film industry, to kind of know the diversity there. So I can't speak more highly of this movie. I think it's just gonna keep becoming a favorite of mine. Really, I think what resonated for me the more and more times I would see it, just the friendship between these two guys, and I think that is something that makes the movie powerful to me. Just these guys that just have this bond, and they have this love for one another, and they're fighting the same cause. But they do have this loyalty and trust and really like genuine love for one another. I think that yes, it is very heightened, like everything in this movie, but I think that's to me what makes this something I like going back to again and again. It's the two leads and the chemistry they have together and the story between them.
Maybe that's another reason I think why it works, and I see that part for sure, the friendship and camaraderie, which, and we've talked about this because we've done a friendship episode,
Yes,
and I think we both, at least I, struggled with finding American movies that centered truly on male friendships, because that kind of display of emotion. I mean, I don't want to generalize and say it doesn't exist. Of course, it exists, but it's not put on display even in real life, amongst two guy friends, versus in Indian society, that's actually very common. Like you'll see, and you probably saw this when you were visiting India, you'll see guy friends just walking around holding hands.
Yeah.
And they may or may not be in a relationship, but it's totally kind of part of the fabric of the culture. So I think to see that is kind of amazing and beautiful. So I'm glad that resonated.
Yeah, I think that again, the more and more times I see it, yes, it is the action and the anti-colonial message and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I think that's what keeps me coming back to it is those two guys. And I think you're right. That's something that isn't found in Western cinema very often, if at all. And these two actors who had not seen him in any movies before, they're now going back and watching all of Rajamouli's films. They do appear several times in his filmography. And I just think they have the charm and the charisma too to carry through in this film. But I just like, again, like one of my favorite movies of all time now. I cannot stop watching this film. It's incredible. So if folks haven't seen it, don't be discouraged by the running time. It's actually a movie that the 3+ hours flies by. It's actually something that I was out with a friend kind of pitching how great this movie was. And we went back to his apartment after like going out for dinner. It was like 11 o'clock at night and we just watched it. And I stayed there till like 3 a.m. And I'm like, you have to watch this. It's like, okay, great. We'll put it on. Because once you start it, at least for me, like you can't stop it. And all you want is more and more of it. And yeah, I stayed over there late into the night as like cheering on this film. So.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll have to watch it with you, and maybe I'll have a different perspective.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's believe me, you're not going to be able to. It's not going to be hard to pull my leg to watch this movie again. Like I'll put it on right after that we record.
Doesn't sound like it. Yeah. I will say that the song is very catchy. It was really fun to watch it last night on the show, and all these videos of people dancing in the aisles and such. Like that's pretty amazing. When do you get to see that? So
yeah. Actually, that's a good shout out too. If folks ever see this movie playing in theaters in wherever they live, I highly recommend going. I've seen it twice in theaters now here in LA. And yeah, people are just really, I mean, you think like the end of Avengers Endgame, people go crazy. It's like that scene for the entire movie. In terms of the amount of moments in this movie that Rajamouli builds like major sort of like emotional moments that want to make you jump out of your seat and cheer. It's pretty wild. I love it. Okay, so let's move on to your number one. What do you got for your number one film?
I feel like my number one is probably from a different planet as compared to RRR.
Yeah,
they're like from different planets totally. My number one is Tar.
The Tar.
The Tar. Where do you even begin? To me, I think this is the movie, if I'm really thinking about it, the movie of our times and the times that we live in, the complications of art, what's right, what's not right, the image we project, what does society think of it, and the mess and the trappings of all of that we find ourselves trapped in right now, where people don't even know what to really say. What is the truth? How far do you go? All of that is packed in here, but it's done in a way that is not preachy. It's not laid out for you. It's not tied in a bow. It's a complicated, brilliantly crafted piece of work that you can take it at surface value and just enjoy the technicalities of it. You can just enjoy arguably one of the greatest performances put on screen in the last many decades.
Yes.
Or you can wrestle with everything that this movie has on its mind and catch yourself on different sides of the argument on any given day. Um, all the three movies that I talked about are movies that have, made me think and feel about something about myself, about my life as time has gone by. But I think this one takes the cake in that area, because it's in a way almost provided me a framework of looking at the times that we are in, honestly. And to top all of that, like it's done so brilliantly and when I say that, I mean that it's not a simply done movie. Like, it's such a rich text on in the scope of a movie, in the sense that it's like an epic film. Like, to me, this is as much an epic movie as a blockbuster movie because of its scope. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah. It's like a big scope movie. It's not just a movie that just happens in a single location with people expressing ideas and thoughts. That is there, but it's a big scale, big canvas movie. So I'll pause there and see, what did you think of Lydia Tarr?
Yeah, I loved this film as well. I mean, this would be my number 4 if we were going with 4 for sure. And I think this is the film that will stand the test of time, I think, from 2022 more so than any. Like, this film will still be studied and talked about and experienced for the next like 50 to 100 years if humans are still around that long. Yeah, this, I think you're right in that there's a lot. The movie has a lot going on, but in a way it's almost like simple in terms of its execution, though how it looks so effortless, but you recognize, and then Kubrick was a lot like this too, and Todd Field was like a student of his, where it feels so effortless, but that every decision was like litigated for hours in the director's mind, purposeful. And every little tiny thing is purposeful, but it comes across as something like super simple, like just a shot that's set up. You're like, oh, that's kind of an interesting shot. But then you think, oh, wait a second, like every single thing in this shot was designed down to a T, and including the performances and everything that especially Cate Blanchett is doing in this movie. You can tell there was a lot of trust between her and Todd Field in terms of how to execute something like this. But yeah, this movie is one of the most complicated movies in a good way that I've like ever seen. Because there's a very surface level story that's super entertaining, but you can think about this movie as I did after I saw this just for weeks, because there's so much going on.
I still think about it.
Me too. There's so much going on in this movie. It is incredible, and then it's enjoyable. It doesn't feel like it was 3+ hours or close to 3 hours, and it flew by. Like I didn't feel like it was long. I wanted more of Tar and to be in this world, even though it was baffling at times. It's a work of art. I'll say that. It's definitely a work of cinematic art, more so than anything that was nominated at the Oscars. Yeah. This past Sunday.
And to your point, entertaining, because often,
oh my god, so like funny
can be, and very funny. Oh gosh,
funny. I mean, there's
the whole apartment showing scene when she's like this.
And the salad, like the cucumber salad piece. There's been some talk around in the analysis of Kubrick, who's my favorite director, that some people kind of view most of his movies as comedies on some level. Yes, there's Strangelove, which is an out-and-out comedy, but a lot of his other movies, you can, like Barry Lyndon or Clockwork Orange, even The Shining can be read at a comedic level in some way. And I think that Todd Field, as a student of Kubrick, is a lot of the same thing. Like, this movie could be a laugh out loud comedy throughout the whole thing, or you could read it as like deadly serious, or it's like so many different angles to it, and that's what makes it entertaining to me.
Totally.
It's an experience. Like, it's hard to describe really what this movie is. You kind of have to see it. In the same way RRR, actually, I would say it's hard to kind of explain to someone kind of what this movie is. You kind of just have to just press play and go on this 3-hour journey. And I think Tar is I mean, I didn't know what the movie was really about before I started watching it. Like, I thought, a conductor, like maybe Fall from Grace, something. I had no idea all the things that it would deal with. It's a fantastic film, just incredible on every level.
Yeah. And to the detail orientedness, which I think we've touched on, is that I know this is not a hot take, but a lot of people thought that Lydia Tarr exists in the real world.
Right. Because
it's just so, to your point, like every single thing on there is so purposeful, and it's almost like, talk about not just writing a screenplay, but truly creating this world and these people
Yes.
from thin air
Yes.
that probably Todd Field knows, like, what does she eat every morning? What is, the scent of her perfume is. He
Yes.
probably knows everything about Lydia
Hmm.
Tarr, and so does probably Kate, and so does everybody else. Again, a great ensemble. Once
Yes.
again, a movie like this can just be a one-person show, but it's
Hmm.
not. Whatever Nina Haas is doing, if she doesn't do that, this movie actually doesn't work, because
Yes.
it has a whole other dimension to who actually puts these people on the top and who
Hmm.
maintains them there.
Hmm.
And how does
Exactly.
this unit between the two of them, wield power the way they do? Oh gosh, I mean, yeah, there's just this movie has so much on its mind. We
Hmm.
couldn't even unpack it here.
Yeah, no, it's definitely special, and I think the Fabelmans and this movie have two of the best like ending shots in a film I
Yes.
saw last year, and I don't know which one I like more. In a way, the Lydia of Tar or the Tar one was, I think, more shocking to me
Oh
in
yeah,
terms of the ending. But Fableman's just is so incredible, that final shot when he adjusts the horizon line. But
yeah.
yeah, I love the Tar all the way down to the final scene. You're like, holy crap! Like my mind is getting blown. Like as just how it ends. It's something else.
This movie reminds me of Kramer versus Kramer, All the President's Men, rich text dramas that were
Mm.
movies of their time, representing and saying something that was, larger than life in the cultures of that time, but they've also stood the test of time, and they've been studied and marveled at. It's so great to get a movie like that, because
Hmm.
I'm at least complaining and moaning about the fact that we don't get movies like that. And I think we got that in Tar, and so are my other two picks, maybe to not at the same level as Tar is, but um, so I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Like I watched Tar, and you sort of sometimes you get that feeling of, okay, this movie again will be studied for 100 years. Like
Yeah,
okay, this is one of those films. Like for me, I felt that way with RRR on a personal level. Like, okay, I will watch this movie every month
that will
until
be
I
studied
die,
too, I think.
and can be studied as well, and will be, I think,
Yeah,
for different reasons. But it is a very unique feeling that I get when I walk out of a movie and be like, okay, not only did I love this movie, sometimes even if I don't love the movie, but you get a sense of this is going to be in a book of the top 100 films of this century, and Tar 100% will be right in there. Probably along with Maverick too, I will say. I think Maverick will be in that list. Lower, way, way, way lower down, but it'll be in there just for what it did. But
yeah. I think the two. Well, I would argue all three of my films actually they hit you on different spectrums of one's head and heart,
yeah,
and it's pretty amazing to have all these three movies represented, well nominated, recognized. Didn't win anything,
I know.
sadly, but
Yeah.
masterful works of art.
Yeah, then maybe to sum it up, because we're at the end here, that point you made earlier about I think your films were are very complicated films in a good way, like examining a lot of different aspects of our society, because we are in a very complicated, incredibly gray world. Versus now that I look back on it, like my three are definitely more black and white.
Mhm.
Especially something like RRR, where the villains are in a good way, like cartoonishly evil. And I sort of was thinking back on the between these three, or with these three movies, to me it is a lot more about the simple emotions that I was looking for in 2022, of just kind of
Mhm.
going back to a more simpler time when I can root for Tom Cruise to shoot the missile here, or we know the sky people are bad, so let's see the whales kind of get to them, or RRR, let's kill
Mhm.
more British colonial soldiers, and cheer on in the theater when they die and the blood sprays on the British map and everyone goes up and cheers. Like that's the kind of stuff I think it just resonated more with me, maybe as a way to escape from the complications of the more gray world that we live in now. And
Mhm.
versus the films, I think your films are more reflective actually of society today for sure,
Yeah.
because of the complexities of it. And I love Fablemans and Tar, and they would have been right under the three that I talked about. But it's just different, which I guess speaks to the point of our podcast, right?
Yeah.
Like we're
No,
we're
I
bringing
love
our own
that.
perspectives into this, and to reflect it even in these lists that aren't even around a theme. But it's was really fun to have this discussion.
I agree. Yeah. When I saw your list, I think I even commented on it in a sheet. I was like, I'm not surprised to see this
Yeah.
list. And then I looked at my list and I'm like, this is the absolute opposite of what you have, which is pretty amazing. But I'm glad that we got to cover like 6 very different movies and different themes and different tones.
Yeah. This is a fun discussion. Hopefully, if listeners haven't seen any of these movies, they're all available now to stream digitally. So I highly recommend every single one of them.
I agree. I don't highly recommend all of them, but I do stand by my own choices.
Yeah.
And one of yours.
Yeah.
But it was a great conversation and a good year in movies. You know, like
I
you
think
said
so.
right at the top that we had a pretty diverse set of movies and recognized by the Academy as well, which is always great.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a rare thing nowadays. And I was happy to see that be recognized. So yeah, hopefully listeners enjoyed the little bonus discussion we had, and we'll be back next week with our next episode, which, Karan, do you want to re-tease that one for folks?
Oh yeah, we are going into some really happy, rollicking territory of loneliness.
Yeah, big fun episode coming up.
So yeah, we're going to be talking about the movies that shaped our feeling and association with loneliness, but I promise it will not be all of a downer. I think it'll be an interesting conversation. We have some pretty interesting movies that we're excited to talk about.
Yeah. So come back next week on Wednesday in your feed. You'll see that discussion. So until next time, see you at the Oscars next year, Karan.
See you at the Oscars. Bye.